The dawn of civilization. Primitive. Dangerous. Exciting. The handwriting is on the wall. If the human race is ever going to amount to anything, it needs
the most civilized caveman I have ever seen.
Look who's come out of his cave.
Hi everyone, this is James from the Cave Dweller Music Podcast. I am joined by my co-host Brendan. We have a special guest for you today. You may have heard of him as Chris Bozzone, behind the project Seer. If you want to check out their latest album, go to our YouTube channel. It is streaming in full there. Before we get into Seer, I also want to mention that Chris does a lot of work around the labels Cadabra and Yuggoth Records. Some really amazing music coming out of there, but we'll get into that in a second too. Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, James and Brendan. Real pleasure to be with you both.
Yeah.
Glad to have you. Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about, we'll start with Seer. Do you want to tell us a bit about Seer?
Yeah, sure. So Seer is a collaboration with film and concert hall composer Peter Scartabello, who runs the Yuggoth Records label. And we have 2 albums to date. The first album is from 2023, and it's called Glimpsing into Oblivion. And the most recent album is called The Hours, which was released in July of this year. And, basically, Seer is a very cinematic type project where it kind of started out as a real mixture of styles and sensibilities, of it being, vocal-based music, but with a cinematic mindset and almost like miniature films or short films as songs. So it's everything from kind of ambient music to experimental music to, kind of sweeping string arrangements. And it has it pulls from a lot of different types of music and love of different music. And the Glimpsing into Oblivion was, primarily in the kind of ambient experimental world of avant-garde songwriting. And the most recent one, The Hours, builds on that template, but also kind of expands into various forms of electroacoustic music and black metal and death metal even. So, we're always looking to expand on our sound and go in hopefully interesting and unexpected places with it.
I think the unexpected places part is an understatement with the Seer projects. I can't honestly say I've heard anything else like it before.
It's like listening to a dream that's not quite a nightmare, but it's haunting, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's really cool to hear, because that's definitely part of that feeling, being in a waking dream, or, very influenced by surrealism and by dreamlike cinema. So It's actually, I can only speak for myself in terms of the origins of where the inspiration comes from, but I know that Pete and I have a lot of shared interests in everything from music to film to art, etc. Though, I'm almost more inspired myself by certain European horror films and directors, directors such as like Jess Franco and Elaine Rob-Grier, who's also a writer, of course, and Valerian Baracek, Andrzej Żuławski, people like that. And then, kind of taking inspiration from those types of directors and that type of cinema, and then kind of turning them into miniature films through song.
I think I said this in my initial review of your first album, but for some reason, the movies that come to mind for me are Labyrinth and Dark Crystal.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah.
Among other stuff.
I've seen those as a child. Haven't seen them in very recent time, but yeah, that's interesting.
You should try rewatching them. I rewatched. My wife hadn't seen them, so we watched them together like not that long ago. And then I don't know if you know, but they actually made a series about Dark Crystal on Netflix like 3 years ago.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
They did.
Yeah, it was decent from what I remember.
Yeah, puppets were great. All that, like anime. Yeah.
Cool.
I think like why it reminds me of that is those movies are very dreamlike, as you said. Like it's like a weird fever dream or a nightmare that a child's having, um, and then they're also surprisingly dark as well.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I kind of like tapping into a kind of fragmented nightmare world, if you will, in terms of the lyrics and how things flow thematically. And, Pete is a real genius as a film composer and arranger of music. So, I'll kind of, in a lot of instances, with Glimpsing into Oblivion, kind of have this initial feel of a song and skeletal, and it'll have drones weaving in and out and everything from very affected piano to harmonium to various synthesizers, but then he'll just work real magic in terms of doing arrangements around electric guitar parts and playing instruments
Hmm.
like kalimba. And he's a master percussionist as well, and can create beautiful string arrangements and very otherworldly epic sounds. So it's just such a natural fit for Pete and I to work together, and it's something that is a real joy and a real gift to be able to work with someone that you're so in tune with. It's funny because we really don't talk very much about what we're going to do. We kind of just hand each other off stuff and then go with it. And that's how I really like to work with music. I don't like talking about it while making it.
Hmm.
I really just kind of like to follow instinct, and that's kind of how it's always been for me with music. If I can do an okay job articulating it, it's usually after the fact, not while making it.
Yep. Makes
Makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah, like you're trying to like get it all. Like I can't explain to you what I'm doing. I'm just doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I totally get it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Man.
So, what would you say are the biggest differences between the first and second album?
Yeah, well, um, the first is more of kind of staying within these certain palettes that I think all very naturally relate and correlate with one another as a flow, even though hopefully it feels like a journey of some kind. It's a journey that maybe makes more direct sense as opposed to the latest album, The Hours, which is more like a roller coaster ride where you don't really know as a listener where you're going to go from song to song.
Hmm.
One song might be because there's some instrumental pieces on The Hours, but an electroacoustic piece that might be sound like someone like Xenakis or something like that, or have kind of like minimalist composer elements, like say like Terry Riley or Lamont Young, who Pete and I both really love. Something like that could go into a song that is very much of technical death metal or black metal, like something like Death Spell Omega or a band like that. And then the next song might be more in the industrial vein of, say, something like, Clock DVA or Coil or something.
Hmm.
So it's really drawing from a lot of different elements. And, that's all of the Seer music. But I think that there's more wild turns within the latest album, The Hours.
I would agree. I also
Hmm.
appreciate that you mentioned Coil because not enough people talk about Coil.
Coil has always been a massive influence on me since my teenage years. So, I kind of started out loving industrial music. and
Okay.
got into Throbbing Gristle and
Love Throbbing
Cabaret
Gristle.
Voltaire, and it wasn't until even though I was really fascinated by Throbbing Gristle and Cabaret Voltaire, it wasn't until I listened to Coil that I absolutely fell in love with music in that realm. And
Right.
I think the first Coil album I heard was Horse Rotivator, and it's interesting because I think that the last 10 years of Coil are the most fruitful and the most interesting and magical, because that's really when they tapped into things that were alchemical and mixing all of these styles in such a way where you create something brand new. And that's what I've always been most interested in within music, is the unclassifiable. And I know that Pete is very much coming from that place as well. And I love when you're juxtaposing or mixing all of these things, and then in turn you're creating something brand new. And whether it's a project like Coil, or say someone like the jazz composer Don Cherry, I love them for similar. I love both Don Cherry and Coil for very similar reasons, even though the sounds are quite different. Is that alchemy, that mixture of styles? Like when Don Cherry in his mid period of his career, how he started out in jazz, but then he was mixing all of these different, for lack of a better term, world elements, but in really fascinating and profound ways. And, it's those kinds of experiments that led to things like the Holy Mountain soundtrack and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I always came back to Coil's, I think it was like 2004, 2005 or something, The Ape of Naples.
Yeah, that's an amazing album.
I love that album.
Yeah.
Brendan, do you know them?
Pretty much they
I
couldn't
don't
go
think so.
wrong.
It doesn't sound familiar.
I'm gonna have to send you something to listen to.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't ring any bells. I looked it up too. I'm like, I don't know.
You're not like the biggest industrial dude, though, are you?
No.
Yeah, I love industrial.
I do like it. I just, I think back then when it was really on the radar, I was not on the radar.
You were a hardcore kid, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like rock and hardcore. Yeah.
Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about your involvement with those two labels we mentioned earlier?
Yeah, sure. So the Seer records are on Yuggoth, which Pete runs, and it's a really fascinating and eclectic label. And they, just like what we were talking about moments ago, the Yuggoth label out of Providence, Rhode Island, really embodies that spirit of being free and adventurous. And, they release everything from classical guitar music to progressive rock to dungeon synth to soundtrack music to black metal, doom metal, etc. So, some of the highlights on that label for me include there is the Arcanist project, which has 3. So that's a dungeon synth project, which is a French duo. And there's 3 albums now, and they're all inspired by the writings and weird fiction of Clark Ashton Smith. And all 3 albums are highly, highly recommended, masterful. If you're someone listening and you love dungeon synth, I always tell people this, that I think it's one of the most impressive, most professional and amazing dungeon synth projects of anything that I've ever heard. It's kind of coming from the Berlin Klaus Schulze Tangerine Dream side of things, but it's very majestic and epic in scope, and all 3 albums come with the highest recommendations. So Also, there's the Italian dungeon synth project Scepter, which is very Coil-esque actually within the dungeon synth realm, but also again kind of Berlin school style, very cosmic, very minimal, but expansive within that minimal pulsating sound. And Radagast from Germany, I believe, is another great dungeon synth project. And then Pete has an amazing metal project called Sky Shadow Obelisk. And Sky Shadow Obelisk is everything from kind of unusual spoken word passages to very brutal singing styles over very technical black metal and death metal elements. And there's also classical music as well. So there is Rebecca Akpoti's Posey's Bow, which is beautiful church organ music. And there's also Justin Henry Rubin has done some beautiful classical music on the label as well. So there's a real range. And beyond the Seer project, which Pete and I's project, collaborative project, he was also kind enough to release a solo album of mine called Phantom Flowers. And Phantom Flowers is everything from kind of drone electronics, a la Lamont Young, Terry Riley, things like that, to more horror-inspired instrumental music. Taking cues from things like Goblin and Fabio Frizzi, etc. But then there's also kind of these experimental song forms where I'm tapping into everything from, say, Keiji Haino to Scott Walker. Scott Walker is also someone that's a massive influence for me because he kind of represents that cracking of clear lines of classification with brilliant albums such as Tilt.
I don't think I've heard Tilt.
Yeah. Have you heard
is this
Climate of Hunter?
No, actually I haven't.
So yeah, if for those that are interested in kind of like the dream fragmented world of songwriting with very unusual combinations of sound, I would highly recommend the last handful of Scott Walker's output and albums. So after he did Scott 1 through 4, those folk albums, he did a Walker Brothers album called Night Flights, and basically have you heard that?
No, I honestly haven't heard a huge amount of his stuff, so it's kind of slipped under my radar, I guess.
Yeah, so Night Flights was kind of the start of making more experimental songs, and it was a Walker Brothers album. But the first 4 songs, if I remember correctly, they're just genius and nightmarish, but very orchestral and very cinematic. And then he kind of continued that with his 80s album, the one album he made in the 80s called Climate of Hunter, which has Evan Parker on it, and has very unusual woodwind arrangements and string arrangements and even kind of rocking elements. But for me, it reaches its peak with Tilt, his album from either 1995 or 1996, which everything from these very grandiose sweeping string arrangements to sounds of chains rustling for minutes on end with field recordings of cicadas and woodwinds weaving in and out of the mix. And then, elements of bombast and these very operatic vocals. So it's not for everyone, but it's certainly some of the most unique and compelling music I've ever heard.
Okay, I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah.
If I start with the Walker Brothers, which album of those should I start with?
Well, the Walker Brothers started out, kind of as making pop music. So some of that stuff is great. But it's the Night Flights album is my favorite Walker Brothers.
Okay.
But it's not really a Walker Brothers album because the second half of it is horrible. But but the first four, I believe it's four or five songs are just incredible. So I would start with, listening to that first half of that album, and then if you really like it, checking out Climate of Hunter Tilt, and then just going on with the other stuff. And they also wound up doing Scott Walker wound up doing towards the end of his life, a collaborative album with Sun, which is pretty interesting.
Oh wow! Wait, I think I might have heard. Which one was that one?
I mean, it's filed under Scott Walker and Son, but I forget what the album's called. But
let me check. Let me see real quick.
Everything that it could have been, but it does have some interesting songs and some great moments.
Okay, I have heard this one. It's called Soused.
Yes.
From like 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I'll start with that album, and then I'll jump over to his personal stuff, his solo stuff, and work my way through that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you've heard Scott 1 through 4, but I absolutely love those albums as well. But that's more kind of traditional singer-songwriting, classical arrangements, etc.
Okay, before he got as experimental.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then jumping away from music for a second, you directed, or co-directed, I should say, a movie called Mirrors, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny how that came about. As someone that's always loved film, naturally I've always wanted to make a film. And I have a friend, Dave Barbary, who is, a childhood friend. And he's someone that reached out to me. I was living in New York City at the time, and he was living in Philadelphia. And he reached out to me out of the blue and said, hey, there's this competition. Would you like to try to make something? And I said, yeah, sure. He said, David Lynch, might watch the film if we make one. And I said, okay, great. How much time do we have? And then he said, oh, well, we would have to make it by the end of this weekend. And, he's calling me at the end of the business week. So I said, all right, well, why don't you give me tonight? I'll try to write something, and I'll take the bus down to Philadelphia tomorrow morning. So I wrote a treatment, and we filmed it in one day. And then, I put music together for it the next day, and Dave did the editing. We did some editing together after shooting stuff, but he finished the editing. And then we submitted it the beginning of that next week. And then I think a few weeks went by, or a month went by, and David Lynch actually watched it, and it screened in conjunction with his first ever U.S. art retrospective. It was, basically the biggest art retrospective of his fine art that had ever happened in the U.S. I think there had been some big exhibitions in different parts of Europe, but this was the first major art exhibit of his work in Philadelphia, which was fitting because, that's where he went to school initially, and that inspired Eraserhead, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, there was some films screened, and in conjunction with this art exhibit, and it won second place, and so pretty cool. Awesome. For making something over the course of a few days.
It's pretty
cool.
That's
awesome.
That's the whole. Oh, sorry, I was going to say that was just a whole lot of "Don't rush me. I wait for the last minute."
Yeah, and
Brendan,
I also directed a film that was going to be a short film, but it wound up having some sound issues because it was shooting again in one day, and it was a very ambitious shoot in a forest during a very windy day. So basically the dialogue was unusable. So it was turned into a music video for Seer. So the first Seer album, Glimpsing into Oblivion, the song "The Sea" is the music video that became, and it stars my wife Julia and also our friend Tien.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's awesome.
I'm glad it saw the light of day for some purpose.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Right.
Brendan, I've been asking a bunch of questions. Do you want to?
Yeah.
I'll let you do some talking.
You're good. You're good. So what got you into playing music? Like who started that path for you?
Yeah, well, actually, that kind of goes back to my early love of industrial music. So, I've really only taken a few. I took a few months of guitar lessons. That's really the only kind of music study that I did. I did go to college and took some kind of production classes and film scoring classes, but in terms of theory and actually like studying an instrument and such, I never really did that. So outside of those, you're 13 years old, you're taking a few months of guitar lessons kind of thing.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it was all very self-taught. So basically, when I learned about industrial music and all of these people that were doing amazing things and putting out incredible releases and couldn't play an instrument at all, in most instances early on, that was very inspiring to me. And I had a friend that had access to an ARP Odyssey. So, as we're collectively getting into projects like Throbbing Gristle, Cabaret Voltaire, Coil, etc. We had an analog synthesizer. We were tape splicing on 4 tracks and, doing kind of like sound cut-ups inspired by William S. Burroughs and Brian Geisen and all of that. And, making experimental music at, 13, 14 years old, etc. And went on to do that throughout my teenage years and kind of went backwards. A lot of times, you're making more conventional stuff early on and then you start experimenting. But I kind of went the opposite way, where after doing experimental music for a number of years, then, I got into playing the guitar, more properly to some extent and taught myself finger picking and, had some years doing singer-songwriter things, making, folk music inspired by projects like Comus, First Utterance album and, kind of dark, acoustic guitar based music and things like that.
Nice. What was what's your favorite soundtrack?
Oh geez, there's so I'm really into soundtracks. So that's a very hard question, but
you can throw out a couple.
Yeah, sure. So, Fabio Frizzi's The Beyond is an absolute masterpiece, as is, his score for Zombie and City of the Living Dead.
Yes.
I love Suspiria by Goblin, of course. I love
amazing.
I love Keith Emerson's Inferno soundtrack. I also love the Phantasm soundtrack.
Ooh.
So,
from the original?
Yeah, the original Phantasm.
Nice.
Yeah, so there's so many great composers. I love like Bruno Nicolai. He has a vast body of soundtrack work that's amazing. I love the Polish composer who worked with Andrzej Żuławski, Andrzej Korzinski, a lot of the films that he did for Żuławski, but also the films that he did for Andrzej Wajda. Films in many cases that I haven't even seen that he did for Andrzej Wajda that I just have beautiful soundtracks. So I'm so into soundtracks that I have a lot of soundtracks in my collection.
Yeah,
And listen to a lot of soundtrack music for films that I haven't necessarily even seen before.
that's sweet. Definitely. Sweet.
Have you seen the movie Sinister?
I don't think so. When is it
Oh.
from and who made it?
Let's see. It stars Ethan Hawke. Sinister movie. I'm bringing it up because it has an incredible soundtrack.
I'll have to check
2000
it out.
2012.
2012. Okay. Yeah, my wife
And-
Julia is a big Ethan Hawke fan, so she's probably seen it.
Okay, the movie is decent. Like the movie's pretty good, but the soundtrack's what really stuck with me. Director is Scott Derrickson, but they even feature Ulver on one of the tracks.
Oh wow. Yeah, I really love a lot of Ulver's music.
Yeah, over
Same.
same.
Yeah.
I mean the Ulver trilogy of the black metal and folk music, those first three
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
albums, they're just complete magic. And then there's certain albums in the later portion of their career. Some I love a lot more than others, but there's a few real gems for me, like Shadow of the Sun. Is it?
Yes, that one's really good. I have that on vinyl. It's
Yeah,
great.
same here. That's a beautiful album.
Yes. And I actually really like the last two that they did, where they went to that kind of like dark pop, like dark wave kind of thing with Flowers of Evil and The Assassination of Julius Caesar. Those are both great albums.
Yeah, they have great production values.
Right.
Really interesting mixture of, almost like pop, electro pop sensibilities, but then very experimental elements. So I really appreciate and admire a lot of their work. I know they're massive fans of Coil, and you can kind of hear that through a lot of their sound.
hmm I think the track that's on the movie was from their 2001 EP, I think it was, called Silence Teaches You How to Sing.
Oh yeah, that's a really cool release.
Yeah, I
haven't
think it was the
listened to that
title
in a
track.
while. Yeah.
Sorry, Brendan, derailed you again.
Have you ever had a chance to play your music in front of an audience?
Yeah, I have a number of times actually. Just recently, I have. Another part, I didn't fully answer one of the questions from some questions ago in regard to the labels, plural, that I work with. So I'm fortunate enough to work with multiple labels, and the other label, and actually most of my recorded output that's come out on vinyl, all of it on this particular label has come out on vinyl, is Cadabra Records. And that's a label out of Syracuse, New York. And they specialize in spoken word records that have cinematic soundtracks to it. So readings of, say, classic weird fiction tales by authors like H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, Edgar Allan Poe, and then also like prose poetry of, say, someone like Thomas de Quincey, Charles Baudelaire, etc. So very eclectic and esoteric selection of literary works read by professional voice actors that have a cinematic soundtrack to it. And I've had the good fortune of doing a lot of those records and doing a lot of that composing. So this is a roundabout way of answering the question that, yes, I've been fortunate enough to play for audiences in quite a number of scenarios, especially over the last handful of years or so. And just this last month of August, I did two different unique kind of performances. I was at the Necronomicon Literary Festival in Providence, Rhode Island. And
Cool.
I did 3 performances there. One with Sean Brainey of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, where we did a live performance of Lovecraft's Beyond the Wall of Sleep, where I did the live musical accompaniment on synthesizers and such, with him reading Beyond the Wall of Sleep. And then I also performed at that festival 2 different nights with Robert Lloyd Perry. And Robert Lloyd Perry is an M.R. James expert and someone who has just unbelievable talent in doing one-man shows of M.R. James' ghost story works. Specifically, that's what he's best known for, but he's done a lot more than that. And we did two pieces. We did Maupassant's The Horla, and also we also did Arthur Macken's N. And then the following weekend, we've been doing, so Cadabra Records has been putting on this series of live performances that are at the studio that I work out of in Philadelphia. So one of my longtime friends, childhood friends, another childhood friend, Barry Knob, he produces all of the music that I do, whether it's for Yuggoth or Cadabra. And I have the good fortune of, working with him, since a very long time, decades now. And anything of value I've done, he's produced. So anyhow, Barry opened a studio called Retro City Studios, and we've been doing live performances / recordings for small, intimate audiences. And in recent time, we did a series of performances to be recorded for live Cadabra record releases that will be coming out in 2025. And we did, again, Arthur Macken's N, but this time for the LP recording, and then also L.A. Lewis's The Tower of Moab. And the cool thing about these performance / recordings is that, the people attending them not only hopefully get entertained by the live performance itself, but then you're kind of in the room in this intimate recording studio, knowing like, hey, I'm going to have a record of this in my hands in 6 months or whatever, So it's a pretty neat situation to be in.
Yeah,
That's cool.
That is really neat. What's your favorite kind of venue to play in?
Oh, well, I can't say that I've played in this incredible assortment of types of spaces.
Yeah.
But the ones that I have played, like at the Necronomicon Festival in Providence, one of the venues is in this beautiful Art Deco hotel, and it's a grand ballroom in this beautiful building, and super high ceilings, beautiful columns, and you're just in this very inspiring space where all around you are beautiful works of art and architecture. So yeah, I love playing in spaces that are full of beauty. So if I had my way and I could go on a tour and play wherever I would want to play in buildings such as that, in beautiful old churches and so forth. So unusual spaces. So like Cadabra put on a festival last summer called Nightlands, and it was a whole weekend of performances of weird fiction, and I pretty much did most of the soundtrack for that weekend. And it was in an old transformed church, and the church was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it was repurposed to be an event space, but it was clearly, you could tell it was formerly a church. So I like things that have kind of an unusual, almost alien feel to them that I think hopefully elevates the experience.
Yeah.
This gets Seer booked at Red Rocker in Colorado.
Is that what kind of space is that?
If you haven't seen it, you have to Google a picture when you get a chance. It's incredible. It's carved right into the red rock, big amphitheater in the mountains.
Yeah, Fish play there, and like crazy psychedelic bands, and like
I think I saw pictures of Sun playing there. Maybe. It was
wow, that would have been wild because the reverb from the cliffs and stuff. But that's an insanely unique space.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a church that was kind of it's remade into like a place where shows go at the Stone Church in Brattleboro. It's pretty cool. So it's like got all the stained glass and all that kind of stuff. And then it's like, it could be a hardcore show there. It could be some jam band. It could be whatever, like it's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's super cool. And that just reminds me of, naming a bunch of different forms of music. That's what I really love about cave dweller music, is that I really appreciate how you guys tap into a very adventurous spirit when it comes to supporting and highlighting all different types of music, just music that speaks to you. And I think that that's what it's all about. It's not fitting neatly into boxes or labels or this or that. They're convenient to reference so somebody knows what you're talking about or has a
right, exactly.
Point. But I really appreciate, and it resonates with me, how you guys approach your love of music.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
That's what we intended. We didn't want constraints. We just wanted, hey, this is good. Let's promote it.
Yeah. I'm sure when we first started out, it was a little rocky,
it took time.
Kind of Q&A and this and that. But now it's like, it's nice. It's good. I like to just know about your experiences and your favorite places. And I always try to find out about the scenes where people are from,
Sure.
I think it's important, and it's nice to know, all right, these guys got this one cool spot you can go to and this and that. You know what? Maybe it might drum up some business later down the line, or who knows, you know what I mean? But it's cool to know, because some people go and travel to shows, and they travel to places and they go, and it's neat to be oh yeah, you know what? I've heard that about there, and who knows?
Yeah. Well, one of these unique spaces. Actually, they've never had live music as part of the film before. So yeah, there's this drive-in movie theater in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, called the Mahoning Drive-In, and they put on all kinds of amazing events. And this Sunday, the Italian film composer Fabio Frizzi is doing a live soundtrack to Lucio Fulci's Zombie. So, he recently did a record with Cadabra Records, for Cadabra Records, of what he's calling the composer's cut of his score for Zombie, where he's gone back into the studio in Rome and re-recorded a brand new version of Zombie. And basically, he's going to be going on tour for the month of September, starting on the East Coast, I think, tomorrow of when we're recording this, and then through the month of all of September, hitting the West Coast by the end of the month. And anyway, so there's these great records if you're interested in checking them out. There's the Zombie composer's cut, but he also several years back did the Beyond composer's cut, where he re-recorded his classic Fulci soundtrack to the Beyond. So both are highly recommended, and check out Fabio Frizzi and his band if you're able to check this tour out, because his band is just absolutely killer live.
Awesome.
I think it would be cool. So you're watch a movie while listening to the band.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and they have a mix when they do these tours. They get a mix where it's it's just sound effects and dialogue. So there's no music, so they can go full blast. So it's a very different kind of experience. When I saw the Beyond Composer's Cut tour, never had I experienced a film that was just so aggressive sonically in the best of ways, because you're hearing a band go all out while the film is playing in the background, etc.
That's so cool. My buddy and his missus went to one of those the other day. I can't remember which one. I think it was Suspiria. One of his those sort of one of those sort of movie things. I mean, where they had the live band play the full soundtrack for the movie.
Yeah, I know that Claudio Simonetti, the keyboard player from Goblin, he's been doing a number of those tours over the last several years.
So cool.
I think that would be a ton of fun. Yeah, pull up to go to the drive-in. I love the drive-in. We go like a
Same.
couple times with the kids and stuff. It's fun.
You have one pretty close to you?
There's one. I'm in Connecticut, so there's one in Mansfield, and then there's another one I think in in Avon or Farmington or something. That area. But there's the one in Mansfield's cool because there's like 3 screens. They usually do 2 movies, back to back, and it's old school, where like the dude's room is like a big trough, and everyone, it's just like, what is that? Like my kids are like, what? I'm like, I know. If you don't like that, go to the stall. You know what I mean? It's just funny. And then they do like the popcorn, all that fun stuff, and.
Well, that's super cool that your kids get to experience a drive-in movie theater, in 2024.
Yeah, it's fun. Mm-hmm. We park. I have a truck, so we'll park it backwards, and then we'll just like get in the bed. We'll like have like a whole bunch of like blankets and sleeping bags and pillows and stuff like that, and we just just chill out in the back. It's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, whenever I drive through Connecticut, I was going there. To Providence recently for the Necronomicon Festival, and it's always one of those things where my wife knows if we're together, and we were in this instance, where either the way driving through or back from somewhere, if Connecticut is involved, we're going to stop at the archive. Do you live somewhat near the archive?
I'm not familiar with that.
It's in Bridgeport.
Okay, that's southern Connecticut.
Yeah, so basically it's this amazing place that has wall-to-wall floors of records and VHS and home video and vintage posters of, crazy movies and things like that.
That's super cool. Yeah, I have to go down there and check that out. There's a place we have Red Scroll Records around in southern Connecticut too, which is good.
Oh yeah, I went there once. That's definitely a really cool place. I've ordered some stuff from them as well, so they have lots of great stuff.
I'm always like, oh man, I just need to go down there and buy it, but I'll ship it to me instead. But that's cool. I'll have to check that out. I've been dying to get down there. I'm sure my wife is like, God dang it, and he's gonna come home with 1 million records, but
yep,
it's okay. I love it. What's your favorite movie?
I mean, that's a really hard question to answer because I have so many favorites. I love most of the filmography of Andrzej Żuławski. Possession is his best known film, and it's an amazing film, but he has a number of other films that are amazing as well. I love filmmakers like Nicholas Roeg and Donald Cammell and Andrei Tarkovsky, Werner Herzog, David Cronenberg. I like a lot of experimental filmmakers as well, like Kenneth Anger. So there's just so many films to that pool to swim in and enjoy. Yeah. So I couldn't say this is my favorite movie.
Gotcha.
These are my favorite films by these directors, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, gotcha.
Do you guys have favorite movies where you can say this is my favorite film?
Oh man.
No. I can't. There's too many that I love, I think.
I guess that's kind of an unfair thing to ask, It's because I'm thinking about it myself, and I'm like, I have a couple to myself, I can't just nail it down to one,
Yeah, no, but it's a fair question because a lot of people can give you a response right away and say, "This is my favorite."
I love the whole Alien series, But if I had to choose out of there, I think it'd be Aliens, the second one.
Yeah, I'm a Alien guy. I love the original film. I think
that one was good.
I think that checks out with your taste that you've described because that's much more atmosphere based than action based.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's funny because as I've gotten older, I have more and more of an appreciation for fun movies. And I would say that Aliens is more fun than Alien. But
I think that's like probably tween when that came out. You know what I mean? So it was all like, yeah, sweet.
I think as well. Have you seen the new one yet? By the way, the latest one that came out, Romulus.
I want to. I haven't.
Chris,
It's out
have you seen it?
already?
Yeah.
No, I saw a preview a few months ago when I went to the movies for the first time in a while, but I didn't know it was already out.
Yeah, I guess it's playing. It's playing. I don't know how long, but yeah, I want to see it. I might just rent it on the TV.
What's the early word on it? Have you heard
James?
anybody recommend it or say it's good, it's bad, it's this, that?
Both. So I mean, no, not both. Really, it's actually much more good than bad. Even the fans who are like diehard fans of this franchise say it's one of their favorites out of like the series. My friend and I both agree that it's the best one since Aliens, probably.
Wow.
Because it actually takes place between the first and second movie,
Huh.
Ah,
Didn't know that.
and they combined the atmosphere, like they combined a lot of elements from the two of them. So it is actually kind of a blend of one and two in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's one of those things that came out of nowhere for me, at least. It wasn't until I saw the trailer that I even knew another Aliens was being made.
Yeah, I know. I was the same. But I don't know if you know this as well. There's actually an Alien series that is finished filming that comes out on FX next year.
Huh. Wow.
I think it's called Homeworld, and it stars Timothy Olyphant. And it's set 30 years before the first movie.
Interesting.
all right.
So we'll see. I mean, I have no idea what to expect from that. It could be really good or it could suck. So my expectations are zero. Which
Yeah.
best way to go into movies of a franchise that you love, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when it goes on and on for decades,
Right. Exactly.
Actors are doing it, and other, there's other, yeah. I love that style of art too, though. Like all that kind of like that. It just, I could live in a place like that.
In the Alien world?
Yeah, it's all dark.
Oh, it's Geiger. What's that? H.R. Geiger
Yeah.
created all of that.
Yes.
I saw a documentary about him, and it showed his house.
Yeah.
And-
He has,
Have you seen
I've
this?
seen the pictures.
there's a bar in Germany, I think, too, that has it like that too.
But
He
his
had-
house, his house was just full of art and books everywhere. I think he had a tub where the whole tub was just had books in it.
Huh.
And then he built like a mini roller coaster outside in his yard.
I remember this. Yeah, looking at the pictures now, I remember this. It's so cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
He actually did an exhibit recently. Well, there was an exhibit of his work recently in LA. I think it was like last year, Christmas time, that had a bunch of the actual aliens he created, like the physical ones that he made for the movie and stuff, and
Oh,
a lot of
wow.
his other artwork.
That's really cool.
Sweet.
Yeah, I meant to go, but I never made it. But it looked sick.
Yeah.
Brendan, just looking at time, do you have many questions left?
No, we could wrap it up. I was gonna ask, like, when you get all this work done, where are you going to eat?
Is that for me?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry. Where am I going to eat?
yeah.
He's asking
Yeah.
what places you go to. What are your regular spots you recommend?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Sorry for being so dense.
Oh, you're fine.
That's all right. I have a weird style of asking questions.
Well, I'm bad at whittling things down, obviously, to one or two answers. So I have a lot of different go-tos. I love spicy food.
Okay,
So
me too. Yeah.
I love Szechuan Chinese food, and
Nice.
I love Mexican food, and I love Vietnamese food, like the spicy soups.
Yeah.
in the world of pho, and I love Indian food. So,
Yeah, me too.
just like music and film and literature, I think the old term, life is the spice is the variety.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
completely butchering that, but I think that's true
Yeah.
when it's said correctly.
Some things are variety is the spice of life.
Yes, thank
That's
you.
it.
But yeah, I think a lot of times too is like for food and music, it's your mood. It's like what's around you, what's your environment. I think my music tastes change when the seasons change. Like
Absolutely.
like once the summer and spring starts popping around, I start listening to a lot more lighter music and maybe a little more happy stuff versus things that are a lot more like darker and more heavy and whatnot.
Yeah, totally. It's one of those things where every year certain seasons come around, and just like it's so fun to watch horror films in the autumn or what have you.
Yeah.
It's like I'll get super psyched about listening to certain albums that I'll usually wait till it's fall to listen to.
Yep.
And it's the same with food too. It's like, oh, it's soup season or what have you. So
Yeah.
everything goes in waves and cycles, or at least it does more if you live in places where the different seasons are really felt to some degree.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I have one final question for you, which is going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
It's a hypothetical. If you were trapped on a desert island and you had a solar-powered Discman and only 3 CDs to keep you sane until you got rescued, what albums would you want to have?
Wow. Keep saying, because it's funny because a lot of music, if I only had 3 discs, it kind of falls into that category of, well, I love these albums so much, but would I want to listen to them over and over again? Because a lot of my
Right.
favorite albums I really save for special times or feeling a special way,
Mhm.
So it's another cop-out answer that I would have to think really, really hard about that, because a lot of those albums, like a lot of my absolute favorite albums, I don't know if I'd want to listen to over and over again, because it might kill that special quality that it has for me when I do.
I was
Right.
thinking, like, oh man, no. So the other day, when I was asked, like, we were talking about this, same question, and I usually end up choosing a couple soundtracks, and then I think I like added a third one to my list of soundtracks that I would bring.
Yeah, I can tell you like things that I've listened to a million times.
Yeah.
I've listened to Fabio Frizzi's the Beyond a million times. I've listened to certain albums like Comus's First Utterance a million times. Love's Forever Changes. Certain Judas Priest albums. So there's plenty of albums I've listened to it over and over again. But when you're listening to so many records over the years, thankfully it's nice to have a rotation of things that that keep it fresh, because you have
Mhm.
a lot of go-tos over the course of decades.
I'll phrase it this way then to make it easier for you.
What if you were
What?
stuck in the spring?
Oh, I think we lost him again.
He's like, fuck, I don't know how. Damn it.
Can you hear me?
We'll just keep it up this time now that I know he's still
Can you hear
connected,
me,
and we'll just wait for
guys?
it to come back.
Yeah, unless he actually has to ditch
No, can you
and
hear
then
me?
restart again. I don't know. I guess
See.
no, it shouldn't matter.
He said he could hear us last time.
Right.
It
So I think
says he's still out there somewhere. I can't see him, but his name is still in the recording right now.
I wonder if it's like a button he hit on his phone.
I don't know. I think it's their thing's like glitching the last few weeks. It never used to do this ever.
Yeah. I thought maybe it was like internet connection or whatever, but now I have like, oh, there we go. Nice.
There he is. I was. Oh. I wonder if maybe they're updating something at the back end and is affecting it right now.
It's possible.
I think we got you now. Can you hear us?
It's weird. It was the same thing where I could hear you again, but you know, not being heard.
Yeah,
That's what happened. Yeah, I think they might be doing some back end work because this never happened before 2 weeks ago, and now it's happened 3 times.
Huh.
Yeah.
And we've been using this for like a year.
Yeah.
So I was going to say is if it's easier for you, I'll rephrase the question to what would be 3 subgenres of music you'd want to have to listen to on a desert island?
Oh, that's a good that would be a little easier for me. I would probably say krautrock because that's cheating, and then that would allow me to listen to all different types of music within krautrock, because then I could listen to a lot of different groovy folk music and progressive rock, but also experimental music and electronic music and psychedelic music. So yeah, like I would definitely pick krautrock for the mileage you can get out of it, you know, because I mean, there's so many different krautrock projects that I love, and I do think that answer is cheating, but that's fine. So that would be one, and I would also have to pick industrial because
There you go.
because you can get a lot of mileage out of that as well, because there's so many different subsets within that, and I loved so many different projects over the years from different bands and artists, and one of the great things, like, you know, when you get into projects like Coil, Nurse with Wound, Legendary Pink Dots, etc. So many of those projects are so prolific, and not only do you have a real expansive range of artists to listen to, but many of them have like 40, 50, 100 albums. So that's been a really cool thing about a lot of artists I've really loved over the years, is that they have such massive bodies of work, which really helps, like, as opposed to, say, your favorite band has 3 albums and then you have to listen to them over and over and over again.
Right.
And then the third would be hard. It might be like 20th century avant-garde classical music, because there's so many different artists that I love that fall into that category. You know, like, you can listen to everything from the beautiful music of Terry Riley to, you know, pianists like Lubomir Melnik to you know, like assorted drone music, and also, you know, things that kind of like fall in between the cracks, like there's like John Zorn's discography, and then you're cheating again, because then you can listen to all kinds of like unusual and beautiful forms of jazz music as well. So yeah, I think it's like strategically maximizing those gray areas so that you can listen to so many different types of music.
Smart.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to ask is, if people want to listen to Seer or support you or either the labels that you collaborate with, what are the best places to do that?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. And again, for having me on. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you both.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great having you.
So Yuggoth Records has a Bandcamp page, and it's yuggothrecords.bandcamp.com, and that has both Seer albums. The first Seer album is on vinyl, but you can also listen to it digitally. And then that's Glimpsing into Oblivion. And then the most recent Seer album from July of this year is on CD, but also streaming as well. and as is my solo album on Yuggoth Records called Phantom Flowers, is a vinyl release. And I want to give a shout out to Matt Jaffe, who did the beautiful album art for my solo record, Phantom Flowers. Matt's done a lot of beautiful work for Yuggoth, and he's also done some amazing work for Cadabra as well. So there's a linkage there. And then if you're interested in hearing my soundtrack work, that's CadabraRecords.com. So Cadabra Records, all as one.com. And I'm very grateful to have a slew of vinyl records on that label. Everything from 7-inch records to LPs to double, triple, quadruple LP box sets, etc. And in this fall, actually in the month of October, to coincide with Halloween, I've just finished my biggest project to date, which is an 8 LP box set of Lovecraft's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. So Andrew Lehman, the founder of the H.P. Lovecraft Society, reading Lovecraft's texts, and it's 6 hours of music and vocal performance. So 6 straight hours of a score, a cinematic score, and it'll go on sale around Halloween time. The Case of Charles Dexter Ward 8 LP box set. So be on the lookout for that. It's certainly the biggest thing I've ever done to date.
Wow.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely awesome talking to you, and we appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
James and Brendan, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and I really appreciate what you guys do, and really appreciate you having me on. So thank you so much.
Anytime. And for anyone listening at home, thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll have another guest for you next week.